The morning sun cast long shadows across the Texas scrubland as Colonel Marcus Mac Reynolds surveyed his property from the eastern fence line. 63 years old, with silver hair cropped military short, and weathered hands that spoke of decades of hard service, Mac moved with the deliberate efficiency of a man who'd spent 30 years in special forces. His eyes, still sharp as a hawk's, scanned the horizon with practiced wariness that civilian life had never quite erased. The 400-acre ranch spread before him like a tactical map, every dip and rise memorized, every approach angle calculated. To casual observers driving down County Road 451, it was just another struggling cattle operation in Valverde County, maybe 10 miles from the Mexican border. But Mac had chosen this land with the same precision he'd once selected insertion points in Afghanistan and Iraq. 3 natural choke points controlled vehicle access. Elevated positions provided clear fields of fire. The main house sat on a defensible rise with 360-degree visibility. He'd traded his uniform for Wrangler jeans and worn boots 3 years ago, but retirement was a relative term for men like Mac Reynolds. The cattle were real enough, 200 head of Angus that provided both income and cover. The workshop behind the barn really did house a 1947 Ford tractor he was restoring. The vegetable garden his late wife Sarah had planted still produced tomatoes and peppers. But beneath this veneer of rural normalcy lay systems and preparations most neighbors couldn't imagine. The morning routine never varied. Up at 0430. Coffee brewing while checking the property's discrete sensor network on his tablet, a system he'd installed himself, disguised as cattle monitoring equipment. A 5-mile run along the perimeter, which conveniently allowed him to inspect fence lines and note any disturbances. Breakfast at 0630, then equipment maintenance that always included cleaning firearms alongside farm tools. Mac climbed into his dust-covered Dodge pickup, driving toward the southern boundary where overnight sensors had detected movement. Probably just javelinas again, but in special forces, probably, got people killed. The border situation had deteriorated steadily over the past 18 months. The Cartel de Nueva Guerra had expanded operations throughout the region, bringing violence that local law enforcement struggled to contain. At Garza's feed store later that morning, Mac loaded 50-pound sacks of cattle supplement into his truck bed, listening more than talking as usual. The ranching community's informal intelligence network rivaled anything he'd experienced in military service. Another ranch hit last week, Miguel Garza mentioned, marking Mac's invoice. The Jackson Place, 40 miles west. Cartel's using it as a waypoint now. Border Patrol found a dozen vehicles hidden in their barn. Mac nodded, filing the information. Anyone get hurt? Jackson's nephew tried to run them off with a shotgun. He's at University Hospital in San Antonio. May not make it. The conversations followed a familiar pattern these days. Rising crime rates. Overwhelmed law enforcement. Federal agencies focused on major operations while local problems multiplied. Mac had seen it before in Afghanistan. The gradual erosion of security, good people caught between violent criminals and distant authorities. Driving home, Mac reflected on the path that had led him here. 3 decades in special forces had taken him to every conflict zone on the planet. He'd commanded elite units, planned operations that never made the news, and earned a chest full of medals he kept in a box under his bed. But it was Sarah who'd convinced him to finally hang up his boots. "You've given enough, Marcus," she'd said during his last deployment. "It's time to come home." Cancer had taken her just 18 months after his retirement. He'd kept the ranch because she loved it, finding solace in the hard work and isolation. Their daughter Rebecca, a trauma surgeon in Houston, worried about him living alone so far from everything. She didn't understand that men like her father were never truly alone. They lived with the constant company of hard-earned instincts and memories that never quite faded. Back at the ranch, Mac parked near the barn and began unloading supplies. The main house stood 100 yards uphill, a modest two-story structure built in the 1920s but extensively modified. Solar panels on the roof provided energy independence. The cellar had been reinforced and stocked. Water came from 3 separate wells, each with manual backup pumps. Inside his workshop, past the restoration project and farming equipment, a locked cabinet held other tools. Night vision equipment. Tactical communications gear. Medical supplies beyond anything a normal rancher would need. Legal weapons, all properly registered, but configured with the accessories and modifications of someone who understood their serious applications. Mac's approach to security wasn't paranoid, it was professional. The house contained subtle defensive improvements invisible to casual visitors. Reinforced doors and window frames. Strategic furniture placement creating natural cover positions. Emergency supplies cached throughout the property. Everything designed to look normal while providing tactical advantages if needed. The afternoon brought his weekly coffee with Sheriff Jim Cartel at the Broken Spur Cafe in town. Another professional relationship disguised as friendship. Cartel, a former Marine MP, respected Mac's background without fully knowing its extent. DA briefed us yesterday, Cartel said, stirring sugar into his black coffee. Nueva Guerra's pushing harder into Texas. They're not just running drugs anymore. Human trafficking, weapons, even hitting cryptocurrency somehow. What's their interest in Valverde County? Mac asked, though he suspected the answer. Location. We're perfect for their routes. Isolated ranches for staging. Rough terrain that limits our response. Not enough federal presence to matter. Cartel paused. They're scouting properties, Mac. Looking for places they can control. Mac had already noticed the scouts. 3 different vehicles conducting paternal flight surveillance on his ranch over the past 2 weeks. Rental cars with Mexican plates. Multiple passengers. They'd been discreet, but Mac had spent years teaching counter-surveillance to Special Forces candidates. He could spot watchers the way a rancher could spot sick cattle. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Mac sat on his porch cleaning his Remington 700, the rifle he'd carried as a young sniper in Desert Storm. The familiar routine of maintenance was meditation, hands moving automatically while his mind processed intelligence. His nearest neighbors, the Hendersons, lived 4 miles east. Good people, but soft targets. The Ramirez family 5 miles south had already reported suspicious vehicles on their property. The pattern was clear to anyone trained to see it. Nueva Guerra was mapping the region, identifying resources and vulnerabilities. Mac's phone buzzed with a text from his daughter. Dinner Sunday? Can't wait to see you. Bringing someone special. He smiled, imagining Rebecca's latest attempt to ensure he wasn't isolating himself. She meant well, but couldn't understand that his solitude was selective, not symptomatic. He maintained connections that mattered while avoiding those that didn't. The army had taught him many things, but Special Forces had taught him the most important lesson: survival favored the prepared. Not the paranoid, not the aggressive, but those who accurately assessed threats and quietly developed appropriate countermeasures. As darkness fell across the ranch, Mac made his evening rounds. He checked trail cameras positioned at approach routes, tested motion sensors, and verified that his various preparations remained functional but concealed. To anyone watching, he was just a retiree puttering around his property. But Colonel Marcus Reynolds had never truly retired. He'd simply changed his area of operations. 300 yards from the main house, hidden in a natural depression invisible from the road, sat a reinforced shed that appeared to store farming equipment. Inside, carefully maintained and legally owned, was an arsenal that would make any cartel gunman reconsider their life choices. Mac didn't expect trouble, but he'd spent 30 years preparing for the unexpected. Walking back to the house under stars undimmed by city lights, Mac felt the familiar weight of responsibility. He'd chosen this ground carefully, prepared it methodically, and would defend it if necessary. Not because he sought conflict, but because some men were born guardians, and retirement didn't change that fundamental nature. Inside, he checked his security monitors one final time before bed. All quiet on the Texas front. But Mac Reynolds knew better than most how quickly quiet could shatter. He'd sleep lightly tonight, as he had for 3 decades. Some habits died hard. Others kept you alive. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The ranch needed tending. Equipment required maintenance. And somewhere in Nueva Guerra's hierarchy, plans were being made that would soon bring violence to his doorstep. Mac couldn't know the specifics yet, but he recognized the patterns. The storm was coming. When it arrived, the cartel would discover that some old soldiers never truly leave the battlefield. They just choose their ground more carefully. The first indication came 3 days later. Mac was repairing fence lines along the southwestern boundary when he noticed tire tracks veering off County Road 451 onto his property. The marks were fresh, made within the last 12 hours based on how the morning dew had settled. Deep treads, consistent with the suburban model favored by cartel scouts. They'd driven approximately 200 yards onto his land before reversing out. Mac knelt beside the tracks, photographing the tread pattern with his phone. The vehicle had stopped at a slight rise that offered clear visibility of his main house and outbuildings. 3 sets of footprints emerged from the vehicle. One stayed by the driver's door while 2 others had walked to the edge of a mesquite grove. Cigarette butts and a discarded water bottle marked their observation post. That evening, Max spread topographical maps across his kitchen table, marking the intrusion point and sight lines. His military training kicked in automatically, analyzing the property from an attacker's perspective. If he were planning an assault, what would he need to know? Lines of approach, defensive positions, routines, vulnerabilities. The kind of information gathered through patient surveillance. The next morning brought a visit from Deputy Maria Sanchez, one of Sheriff Coulter's more competent officers. She pulled up to the house in her patrol vehicle, accepting Mac's offer of coffee on the front porch. "Got a bulletin from DA this morning," she said, cradling the mug. "They intercepted communications about Nueva Guerra expanding operations in our sector. Something about establishing permanent logistics infrastructure." Mac had heard similar language in Afghanistan when the Taliban secured territory. "They're looking for safe houses and trafficking routes." "Exactly. Sheriff wanted me to check on our more isolated residents." "You've noticed anything unusual?" Mac described the tire tracks and surveillance indicators, downplaying his tactical analysis. Maria took notes, her expression growing concerned. "That's the 4th report this week. The Hendersons saw vehicles with tinted windows driving slowly past their place. Mrs. Ramirez found strangers photographing her barn." After Maria left, Mac initiated his own intelligence-gathering operation. He retrieved specialized equipment from his workshop, a parabolic microphone, low-light cameras, and motion sensors with cellular connectivity. That afternoon, he began installing the enhanced surveillance system, disguising the devices as ranch maintenance equipment. Over the next week, the sensors detected multiple incursions. Vehicles approaching after midnight, stopping just outside his fence line. Figures moving through the brush with night vision equipment. Someone had placed trail cameras watching his driveway and main routes to the highway. Mac located and left these devices undisturbed, not wanting to reveal his counter-surveillance capabilities. On Tuesday evening, while reviewing sensor data in his workshop, Mac's military-grade radio scanner picked up encrypted transmissions. The encryption was sophisticated but not unbreakable. Years of signals intelligence experience helped him partially decode the traffic. Key phrases emerged. "Norte Ranch Viejo, Coronel Redoredo, Vigilancia Continua." They knew he was a retired colonel. They were maintaining continuous surveillance. Mac contacted Sheriff Cartel through their agreed secure channel. A seemingly innocent discussion about cattle prices that contained coded information about the threat level. "Market's getting unstable," Mac said, using their predetermined phrase for cartel activity. "Heard the same. Might need to adjust our buying strategy." Carter's response indicated he understood the escalation. That night, Mac conducted a detailed reconnaissance of his own property. Moving with the stealth that had kept him alive through dozens of special operations missions, he identified and mapped 7 observation posts the cartel had established. They were good, professional even, but Mac had trained some of the best special operators in the world. He saw what they wanted him to miss. The surveillance pattern revealed their intelligence-gathering priorities. They were particularly interested in his workshop, the reinforced shed, and vehicle movements. They'd identified his morning running route, and had teams positioned to observe his weekly trips to town. Someone had done their homework. On Friday morning, Mac discovered they'd progressed beyond observation. Fresh excavation marks near his eastern fence line suggested someone had been testing the ground, possibly for tunnel construction. A common tactic for cartels establishing permanent presence on targeted properties. Mac spent the afternoon implementing countermeasures. He relocated critical supplies, created false trails to confuse surveillance, and established new emergency protocols. His daughter Rebecca called during dinner preparation. "Dad, you sound distracted. Everything okay?" "Just ranch business, honey. Looking forward to Sunday dinner." "You sure? You've got that tone, like when you were planning missions." Max smiled despite himself. Rebecca had inherited her mother's intuition. "Just dealing with some trespassers. Nothing serious." After the call, Mac reviewed his defensive preparations. The main house could withstand a significant assault, but he couldn't defend the entire property alone. He needed intelligence on their timeline and specific objectives. The breakthrough came Saturday night. Mac's sensors detected movement near the western fence line, a foreman team establishing an observation post. Instead of avoiding them, Mac decided on direct reconnaissance. He approached downwind, using terrain features for concealment. The team spoke quietly in Spanish, assuming they were alone. Mac's fluency in multiple languages, another gift from Special Forces, allowed him to eavesdrop effectively. They discussed their surveillance schedule, complained about the assignment, and most importantly, mentioned an operation planned for the following week. One Sicario pulled out a tablet, reviewing what appeared to be architectural plans. Mac recognized his own property layout, annotated with tactical notations. They'd identified his workshop as a possible armory, and noted multiple defensive positions around main structure. Their assessment was professional but incomplete. The conversation revealed their primary interest, establishing a logistics waypoint for drug and weapons trafficking. Mac's ranch offered perfect positioning, isolated, defensible, with multiple escape routes. They planned to either force him to cooperate, or eliminate him as an obstacle. As Mac withdrew, he accidentally disturbed a piece of equipment the cartel had left behind. A voice called out, "Quien está ahí?" Mac froze, calculating options. The team activated flashlights, searching the brush. For 12 tense minutes, Mac evaded their search pattern, using skills honed in jungle warfare. Finally clear, he returned home and activated secure communications equipment kept for emergencies. His contacts in federal law enforcement needed to know about Nueva Guerra's expansion plans, though Mac suspected the response would be limited. Agencies were overwhelmed, resources stretched thin. Sunday morning arrived with thunderstorms rolling across the Texas Hill Country. Rebecca's visit would have to wait. She called to reschedule, citing flash flood warnings. Mac was secretly relieved. He needed time to refine his defensive strategy. That afternoon, 3 vehicles approached his gate, 2 SUVs and a pickup truck with Chihuahua plates. They stopped at his cattle guard, idling. Mac watched through binoculars from his reinforced upper window. 8 men, all armed, studying his property openly now. His phone rang. Sheriff Coulter. Mac, got reports of suspicious vehicles on County Road 451. That near you? Looking at them now. 3 vehicles, 8 subjects. They're conducting visual reconnaissance. Want me to send deputies? Negative. Let them look. But Jim, they're planning something bigger. You need to brief your people. After 20 minutes, the vehicles departed. Mac knew this was the final reconnaissance before action. They'd gathered intelligence, tested responses, identified patterns. The next visit would be different. That evening, Mac walked his property with renewed purpose. In his workshop, he prepped equipment and reviewed contingency plans. The main house became a subtle fortress, furniture repositioned, emergency supplies staged, weapons placed for rapid access. Around midnight, Mac's sensors detected unusual activity. Instead of the normal foreman surveillance team, there were 12 individuals taking positions around his property perimeter. They moved with purpose, establishing what appeared to be an operations base in the Mesquite Grove. Mac observed through night vision equipment, noting unit organization and weapons. These weren't standard sicarios. Their movement patterns suggested military or paramilitary training. Nueva Guerra had sent an assault team. The tactical radio intercepted final preparations. Operación Rancho Norte iniciará mañana a las 0300. Operation North Ranch would begin tomorrow at 3 a.m. Mac settled into his command post, a reinforced section of the upper floor with overlapping fields of fire. He checked weapons, tested communications, and reviewed escape routes. Then he did what professional soldiers do before battle. He rested, conserving energy for what lay ahead. Sleep came easier than civilians might expect. Mac had learned long ago that fear was a luxury professionals couldn't afford. He'd chosen this ground, prepared for this moment, and accepted whatever outcome awaited. At 0200, Mac rose and dressed in dark, practical clothing. He moved through the house with deliberate calm, activating defensive systems and checking final preparations. His training took over, that familiar cold professionalism that had carried him through 3 decades of America's shadow wars. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving clear skies and a setting moon. Perfect conditions for night operations. Mac smiled grimly. After 30 years of hunting America's enemies in their backyard, he'd finally get to face some on his own turf. At 0245, Mac detected movement on his sensors. The assault team was positioning for breach. He keyed his tactical radio to the sheriff's emergency frequency and spoke the predetermined code phrase. Thunder is rolling. Coulter's response came immediately. Copy, Thunder. Help is 20 minutes out. 20 minutes. In special operations, that was a lifetime. Mac would have to hold alone. Through his night vision, Mac watched the cartel team advance in 2 columns, demonstrating reasonable small unit tactics. They'd done their homework but were about to discover the difference between theory and facing a veteran operator on his prepared ground. At exactly 0300, the attack began. Flashbang grenades detonated near his workshop, presumably to mask the main assault on the house. Smoke grenades followed, creating concealment for the advancing sicarios. Mac waited behind reinforced positions, controlling his breathing, letting them commit to their plan. The head of household security would panic now, firing wildly into the smoke. But Mac wasn't running household security. He was conducting a defensive operation. The first wave reached his perimeter. Mac observed their movement patterns, identified their team leaders, and began prioritizing targets. In minutes, these men would learn why American Special Forces had been feared in every conflict zone for generations. As his finger found the trigger guard, Mac felt that familiar calm descend, the warrior's mindset that had never truly left him. The cartels had made a critical error. They'd assumed the old colonel was just another soft target. They were about to receive a very expensive education. The first breach attempt came at the workshop's rear entrance. Mac watched through his tactical display as 4 sicarios stacked up on the reinforced door, preparing for entry. Their formation was textbook: number 1 man with a shotgun for breaching, 2 and 3 with automatic weapons, for providing rear security. They'd clearly received paramilitary training. Mac triggered the workshop's external lights, flooding the area with 2,000 lumens of LED brilliance. The sudden illumination caught the breach team off guard. Through his rifle scope, Mac saw them instinctively shield their eyes, a critical 2-second vulnerability. He didn't waste it. The first shot from Mac's position dropped the breacher before he could employ his shotgun. The .308 round punched through tactical gear like it wasn't there. The second shot caught number 2 as he tried to process what was happening. By the time the remaining sicarios dove for cover, Mac had already displaced to his secondary position, a fundamental rule of sniper operations: never fire more than twice from the same location. "Franco-tirador!" someone screamed. "El Coronel, yes, un maldito franco-tirador!" The revelation that the old colonel was a trained sniper seemed to shake their confidence. Mac heard rapid communication over their radios, requests for new orders, reports of casualties, obvious confusion in their command structure. The assault shifted tactics. Smoke grenades popped across his property, creating a gray haze that would defeat conventional optics. But Mac had planned for this contingency. Thermal imaging sensors activated throughout the compound, feeding data to monitors in his hardened positions. The smoke that should have blinded him instead revealed the heat signatures of every attacker on his property. Through the swirling smoke, Mac identified the assault's leader, a tall figure directing troops with hand signals, maintaining radio discipline. This one had legitimate military experience. Mac tagged him as the primary high-value target and began maneuvering for a clear shot. The memories flooded back, not interfering with his actions but enhancing them. Ramadi, 2006. His team pinned down by insurgents with superior numbers. Mac had turned the tide by identifying and eliminating enemy leadership, creating chaos in their command structure. Different war, same principles. The cartel initiated their second wave, this time against the main house. 12 sicarios advanced in bounding overwatch, each team covering the other's movement. Mac respected their discipline even as he prepared to destroy it. He'd constructed several fighting positions throughout the house, connected by reinforced crawlspaces that allowed rapid movement between firing points. When the first team reached his front porch, Mac opened fire from an upstairs window, dropping 2 attackers before displacing to a position overlooking the back entrance. The sicarios' return fire shredded empty air where he'd been seconds before. Their ammunition expenditure told Mac they were equipped for a prolonged fight, but their tactics revealed they expected a quick victory against a soft target. "Coronel!" The leader's voice boomed across the property, amplified by a bullhorn. "We know you're alone. Surrender now, and we guarantee safe passage. We only want to talk business." Mac responded by putting a round through their command vehicle's engine block. The massive diesel engine coughed and died, eliminating one escape route. He immediately moved again, this time to a concealed position in the basement with firing ports at ground level. The third assault proved more sophisticated. The sicarios had identified his displacement pattern and tried to predict his next position. Coordinated fire from multiple angles kept him pinned while an assault element moved on the house's eastern side. Mac recognized the tactic. It was straight out of U.S. Army urban warfare doctrine. Time to change the rules of engagement. Mac activated his property's defensive systems. Remotely triggered explosives, legally purchased tannerite positioned as pest control devices, detonated in predetermined kill zones. The blasts weren't lethal but created chaos, separating the assault element and forcing them to seek cover. In the confusion, Mac displaced again, this time to an external position he'd prepared weeks ago, a camouflaged spider hole with overhead cover, positioned to control approaches to both the house and workshop. From here, he could engage targets while remaining virtually invisible. The cartel leader, increasingly frustrated, made a critical error. He stepped into the open to rally his scattered forces, believing Mac was still trapped in the house. The crosshairs settled on center mass. Mac's finger began taking up trigger slack. Then his earpiece crackled. "Mac, this is Sheriff Cartel. We're 2 minutes out with state police backup. Mark your position." Mac keyed his radio twice, acknowledged but maintaining radio silence. The approaching sirens changed everything. The cartel had minutes to complete their mission or abort. Desperation drove the sicarios to a final, coordinated assault. All surviving elements converged on the main house, firing everything they had. Windows shattered. Walls splintered. The front door disappeared in a hail of bullets. Mac held his position, picking targets carefully. 3 more sicarios fell before the others realized the house was empty. Mac had been engaging them from external positions for the past 10 minutes. The revelation created panic. The leader barked orders in rapid Spanish, trying to organize a retreat. But Mac had spent 3 decades learning how to break enemy morale. He began targeting vehicles, methodically disabling every escape option. Tires exploded. Radiators erupted in steam. Fuel tanks punctured, creating expanding pools of gasoline. As law enforcement vehicles appeared on the horizon, the cartel's discipline finally shattered. Individual sicarios broke and ran, abandoning their wounded, every man for himself. Mac continued engaging, ensuring none escaped with intelligence about his capabilities. The leader made a last stand, taking cover behind a disabled SUV and firing controlled bursts toward Mac's position. This one had heart, Mac gave him that. But heart without position was just delayed defeat. Sheriff's deputies and state police surrounded the property, weapons drawn, trying to make sense of the battlefield. Mac emerged from his position, rifle slung, hands visible. Sheriff Cartel approached, surveying the carnage with professional detachment. "Jesus Christ, Mac! What happened here? They came for my ranch. I disagreed with their business proposal." Law enforcement processed the scene with growing amazement. 11 cartel members down, 6 dead, 5 wounded. 0 law enforcement casualties. 0 civilian casualties. The tactical precision impressed even the SWAT team commander. "This wasn't self-defense," one state trooper muttered. "This was a professional military operation." Mac shrugged. "I was defending my home. They chose the tactics." As paramedics treated the wounded, Mac noticed movement near the tree line. The cartel leader, somehow still mobile, was attempting to escape. Mac touched Cartel's shoulder and pointed. "Want me to handle it?" Mac asked quietly. "We'll take it from here." Cartel replied, then added lower. "You've done enough, Colonel." The investigation revealed the scope of Nueva Guerra's operation. The sicarios carried detailed plans for converting Mac's ranch into a major trafficking hub. Maps, schedules, architectural modifications, they'd invested significant resources in this operation. They marked every defensive position, the SWAT commander noted, studying the captured documents. "Knew about your workshop, your weapons storage, even had your morning running route plotted." "They knew a lot," Mac agreed. "Just not enough." As crime scene technicians worked, Mac's daughter arrived, having heard emergency reports on the news. Rebecca rushed from her car, medical bag in hand, stopping short when she saw the battlefield her childhood home had become. "Dad! Are you hurt? What happened?" "Some people wanted to redecorate. I had different ideas about the color scheme." Rebecca's eyes swept the scene, Damaged vehicles, shattered windows, armed law enforcement everywhere. Her medical training kicked in, and she moved to assist with the wounded, but her eyes kept returning to her father with a mixture of fear and dawning understanding. "All these years," she said later, as they sat on the damaged porch, "I knew you were special forces, but I never really understood what that meant." "It means being prepared," Mac replied simply. "It means never becoming a victim." The sun was rising fully now, revealing the extent of the night's violence. Shell casings glittered in the morning light. Emergency vehicles crowded the drive. Federal agents were already arriving, their black SUVs announcing that this incident had national implications. Mac's neighbor, Tom Henderson, approached the police line, his face a mask of disbelief. "Mac? Is that you? What in God's name happened here?" "Disagreement over property values," Mac called back. As the day progressed, the full picture emerged. Nueva Guerra had planned similar operations against 3 other ranches, but Mac's successful defense had disrupted their entire strategy. Federal agencies mobilized, launching operations against cartel assets across the region. By afternoon, Mac's ranch resembled a forward operating base. FBI, DA, Border Patrol, and Homeland Security had all established command posts. Military consultants arrived to study Mac's defensive preparations, professionally impressed by the integration of civilian cover with tactical functionality. "This is textbook asymmetric defense," one analyst commented. "You turned a civilian structure into a force multiplier without compromising its primary function." Mac shrugged. "I just wanted to raise cattle in peace." As evening approached, the immediate crisis had passed, but Mac knew this was just the beginning. Nueva Guerra wouldn't forget this defeat. They'd paid in blood and reputation for underestimating a retired American colonel. There would be consequences. Sheriff Coulter found Mac cleaning his rifle on the back porch, methodically maintaining the weapon that had served him so well. "Federal boys want to put you in witness protection," Coulter said. "Maybe you should consider it." Mac continued cleaning, his movements precise and unhurried. "Jim, I spent 30 years being sent places I didn't want to go, fighting wars in other people's countries. This is my home. My land. If they want another round, they know where to find me. They'll come back harder. Then I'll be ready harder." As night fell, Mac walked his property, assessing damage and beginning repairs. The ranch had survived its first real test, but he knew this was just the opening skirmish. The cartels had infinite resources and long memories. They'd be back, better prepared, more determined. But Mac Reynolds had something they couldn't buy or intimidate: a lifetime of experience in asymmetric warfare, an intimate knowledge of his terrain, and the quiet resolve of a man defending his home. He'd fought in distant lands for abstract concepts of freedom and democracy. Now, for the first time, he was fighting for something personal. The stars emerged over Texas, unmarred by city lights, the same stars that had watched over countless battles throughout history. Mac felt a strange sense of completion. After a career of fighting in shadows, he finally faced an enemy in the open, on ground of his own choosing. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, Coronel." Mac typed back, "I'm counting on it." He returned to his house, past the bullet holes and broken windows, through the damaged doorframe that would need replacing. Inside, he checked his defensive positions, reloaded magazines, and began planning for the next assault. Because in Mac's world, the battle was never truly over. It just entered different phases. And Phase 2 was about to begin. The second wave came exactly 1 week later, at 0200 hours under a moonless sky. Mac had spent the intervening days transforming his ranch into a hardened defensive position, working with federal agencies to install additional surveillance, and preparing for what he knew was inevitable. Nueva Guerra's reputation demanded they respond to their defeat with overwhelming force. This time, they brought 50 men and military-grade equipment. Mac detected their approach 30 minutes before contact. Satellite phones, encrypted radios, night vision, the cartel had upgraded significantly. They moved in 4 assault elements, approaching from cardinal directions to prevent escape and divide defensive fire. Their leader, identified through intercepted communications as Eduardo El Fantasma Vargas, commanded from a mobile operations center 2 miles south. The first indication of their enhanced capabilities came when Mac's surveillance network began failing. Sophisticated jammers disrupted his wireless sensors, forcing reliance on hardwired systems and direct observation. The cartel had learned from their previous failure. Mac activated his prepared response. Castle Protocol. Prepositioned charges detonated along approach routes, not to kill but to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones. Smoke generators activated, creating artificial fog that would work against the cartel's night vision, while Mac's thermal systems remained effective. The eastern assault element struck first, breaching the outer perimeter with Bangalore torpedoes, military demolition charges designed to clear obstacles. Mac engaged from his primary fighting position, a reinforced bunker disguised as an equipment shed. His first shots dropped the demo team, but return fire was immediate and accurate. These weren't street thugs. Vargas had brought professional mercenaries. Mac's tactical radio crackled with intercepted cartel communications. El Coronel este en el cobertizo este. Fuego concentrado. Prepara asalto coordinado. They'd identified his position. Time to relocate. Using a tunnel system installed during the week's preparations, Mac displaced to the main house's fortified basement. Above him, windows shattered as the western assault element initiated their breach. Mac had transformed the house into a fatal funnel. Every entrance led to overlapping fields of fire, every room designed to channel attackers into prepared kill zones. The first team through the front door encountered claymore mines triggered by breaking infrared beams. The explosion turned the entryway into a charnel house. Survivors retreated, dragging wounded, their screams echoing across the property. Mac emerged from a concealed firing position, engaging the northern element as they attempted to flank the house. His rifle spoke with methodical precision: 1 shot, 1 target, constant movement. The attackers' superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't fix his location. Necesitamos apoyo pesado, Vargas's voice commanded over the radio. Traigan el lanzacohetes. Rocket launchers. Mac had anticipated heavy weapons but hoped federal surveillance would prevent their deployment. No such luck. He watched through periscope as a team maneuvered an RPG-7 into position near his workshop. The first rocket impacted the workshop's north wall, the explosion sending tools and debris flying. Mac's carefully maintained tactical equipment survived in hardened cases, but the message was clear: Vargas would level every structure to kill 1 man. Mac responded by activating Phase 2 of Castle Protocol. Remote-controlled weapon stations, built from legally purchased components and hunting equipment, opened fire from concealed positions around the property. The sudden eruption of automatic fire from multiple locations created chaos in the cartel's ranks. They couldn't determine how many defenders they faced. In the confusion, Mac displaced again, this time to his ultimate fallback position, a spider hole complex beneath the barn, connected to his other positions by narrow tunnels. From here, he could engage any section of the property while remaining virtually undetectable. The barn itself became a battleground. Sicarios breached from multiple entrances, sweeping with tactical precision. Mac waited until they fully committed, then triggered prepared charges in the hayloft. Burning hay rained down, transforming the barn into an inferno. Those who escaped the flames ran directly into Mac's firing lanes. As the barn burned, Mac observed something interesting through his thermoscope. A figure directing the southern assault element moved with distinctive military bearing, issuing commands with hand signals Mac recognized from his own Special Forces training. This wasn't a cartel mercenary, this was a former American operator. The revelation changed everything. Mac keyed his encrypted satellite phone, connecting to a number he hadn't used in 5 years. Viper 6, this is Mustang 2-1. Code word, Prometheus. I have positive ID on a Broken Arrow operating with hostile forces. Broken Arrow meant a former U.S. Special Operations soldier now working against American interests. The response was immediate. Mustang 2-1, Viper 6 copies. QRF inbound your location. Time on target 30 mics. 30 minutes. Mac had to survive against an enemy who knew American tactics. The rogue operator, apparently recognizing his exposure, took direct command of the assault. The attacks became more sophisticated, overlapping fields of fire, proper use of cover and concealment, coordination between elements. Mac found himself truly challenged for the first time. They targeted his tunnel system, using thermal imaging to detect underground movement. Grenades dropped through improvised openings, forcing Mac to abandon his subterranean network. He emerged near the ruined workshop, immediately engaging threats while seeking new cover. The firefight intensified. Tracers crisscrossed the darkness like angry fireflies. Explosions lit the night as both sides employed heavy weapons. Mac's ammunition ran low. He'd planned for a siege, not this level of sustained combat. Then Vargas made a critical error. Frustrated by the stalemate, he committed his reserve force, 20 fresh Sicarios supported by technical vehicles mounting heavy machine guns. They approached from the south, headlights blazing, believing overwhelming firepower would break Mac's resistance. Mac had saved his trump card for exactly this moment. 3 concealed M18 Claymore mines, legally purchased as industrial demolition devices, detonated in sequence. The devastating barrage of steel balls shredded the advancing vehicles and their occupants. The sudden reversal broke the assault's momentum. In the chaos, Mac identified the rogue operator again, a tall figure with distinctive movement patterns, coordinating remaining forces near the burning barn. Mac's crosshairs settled on the target. His finger began taking up trigger slack. The shot never came. A massive explosion rocked the ground. One of the cartel's vehicles had detonated, probably hit by Mac's defensive fire. The blast wave knocked Mac sideways, his shot going wide. When he recovered, the operator had vanished into smoke and darkness. Federal helicopters appeared on the horizon, their searchlights stabbing through smoke and flame. The remaining cartel forces, seeing their reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time, began retreating. Mac continued engaging, determined to prevent their escape with intelligence about his defenses. But Vargas had one final card to play. Coronel! His amplified voice boomed across the battlefield. Look to your east! Mac shifted position and froze. 3 vehicles approached from the Hendersons' property, but these weren't cartel reinforcements. Through his scope, Mac saw his neighbors, Tom and Mary Henderson, bound and gagged in the back of a pickup truck. Cartel gunmen held weapons to their heads. Surrender, or they die! Vargas demanded. You have 30 seconds! Mac's mind raced. The Hendersons were innocent ranchers, good people who never harmed anyone. But surrendering meant death and would allow Nueva Guerra to establish their trafficking route. The tactical decision was clear. The moral decision was agonizing. Federal helicopters circled overhead, unable to engage without risking hostages. Mac keyed his radio. Federal units, this is the property owner. Hostage situation in progress. Do not engage vehicles approaching from the east. 20 seconds remained. Mac made his choice. He emerged from cover, rifle raised above his head, walking toward the hostage vehicles. I'm coming out, he shouted. Release them, and you can have me. As Mac approached, something caught his eye, a subtle hand signal from Tom Henderson, barely visible in the darkness. Mac recognized it instantly. The old rancher was a Vietnam veteran. The signal meant, "Get ready." Mac continued forward, appearing defeated. 10 yards from the vehicles, Tom Henderson suddenly rolled sideways, knocking his guard off balance despite being bound. Mary followed suit a second later. Mac's rifle snapped down. 3 shots, 3 targets. The hostage-takers dropped before they could react. Tom and Mary rolled clear as Mac engaged the vehicle drivers. Federal snipers, finally having clear shots, eliminated remaining threats. With their leverage gone and federal forces closing in, the cartel's resistance collapsed. Vargas himself attempted to flee but ran directly into a federal tactical team fast-tripping from helicopters. The rogue operator, however, had vanished, a problem for another day. As dawn broke over the devastated ranch, the scope of the battle became clear. Mac's property looked like a war zone, buildings burning, vehicles destroyed, the landscape cratered from explosions. But he'd held. One man against the cartel army, and he'd held. Federal agents debriefed Mac as medics checked him for injuries. The Hendersons, shaken but unharmed, refused evacuation. "If Mac's staying, we're staying," Tom declared. "This is our home too." The agent in charge, Special Agent Sarah Chin, surveyed the battlefield with professional amazement. "Colonel Reynolds, I've seen combat zones with less damage. You held off 50 heavily armed attackers, eliminated a major cartel operation, and exposed a rogue American operator. This goes way beyond self-defense." Mac was cleaning his rifle, hands moving automatically despite exhaustion. "They came from my home." I disagreed. "The cartels won't stop. You've become a symbol now, the American who stood alone against their army and won. They'll keep coming. Then I'll keep standing." As cleanup operations began, Mac discovered something interesting in the wreckage of a cartel command vehicle, detailed plans for similar operations across the Southwest. His ranch had been a test case. If successful, Nueva Guerra planned to seize strategic properties throughout Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. By defeating them here, Mac hadn't just defended his home. He'd disrupted a major strategic initiative that could have transformed the cartel's operational capabilities along the entire border. The rogue operator remained a concern. Analysis of battlefield footage revealed partial identification. Former Delta Force, discharged 5 years ago, now mercenary. His knowledge of American tactics had nearly turned the battle. Mac filed the information away. That confrontation would come. By noon, Mac's ranch resembled a military forward operating base. Federal agencies established a permanent presence, using the property as a regional command center for anti-cartel operations. Mac found himself unofficially appointed as tactical advisor, his successful defense studied as a model for property protection in contested areas. Rebecca arrived in the afternoon, having driven through the night after hearing news reports. She found her father directing repairs to defensive positions while federal agents took notes. "Dad," she said, surveying the destruction, "you can't keep living like this." "Like what?" "Like you're still at war." Mac paused his work, really looking at his daughter for the first time that day. He saw Sarah in her eyes, the same mixture of strength and concern. "Rebecca, some of us never really leave the war. We just find different battles. This ranch, this land, it's worth fighting for. And sometimes the war finds you whether you want it or not." That evening, as the sun set over his battered but unbroken ranch, Mac stood on his porch with Sheriff Coulter. Federal agents patrolled the perimeter. Helicopters maintained overwatch. The war had indeed come to him, but he'd met it on his terms. "What now?" Coulter asked. "Now we rebuild. Stronger. They'll be back, maybe not Vargas, but others. The cartels don't forget. Neither do colonels, apparently." Max smiled grimly. "I'm just a rancher who wants to be left alone." Sure you are. And I'm just a small-town sheriff who happened to call in federal support at exactly the right moment. They watched the sunset in companionable silence, two warriors who understood that some battles never truly end. The cartels had learned an expensive lesson about underestimating American resolve. But Mac knew this victory, decisive as it was, represented just one battle in a longer war. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Well played, Colonel. Until next time. Ghost. The rogue operator. Mac saved the number, knowing their paths would cross again. For now, though, he had a ranch to rebuild and a community to protect. The war had come to him, and he'd answered with everything he had. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, Mac Reynolds stood victorious on his own land, under Texas stars, having proven that some things were still worth fighting for. The revelation wasn't just about his capabilities. It was about the enduring power of one determined individual standing against seemingly insurmountable odds. And winning. The morning after the second battle, Mac stood amid the destruction of his ranch, watching federal cleanup crews catalog evidence. Smoke still rose from the burned barn. Shell casings littered the ground like brass confetti. His carefully maintained property resembled a combat zone, which, he reflected, it had become. Special Agent Chen approached with a tablet. Colonel, we've identified 37 cartel casualties. Vargas is in federal custody, already talking deal. The intelligence from those command vehicles is gold. We're rolling up Nueva Guerra operations across 3 states. Mac nodded, his eyes on the horizon. What about the rogue operator? Gone. Like he was never here. But we've got facial recognition working on battlefield footage. Rebecca emerged from the damaged house, carrying coffee. She'd stayed despite his protests, insisting on helping coordinate medical response. Dad, there's media gathering at the gate. CNN, Fox, even BBC. Your international news. Tell them I'm unavailable. They're calling you the last stand, Colonel. Social media's exploding. Ranch Defender is trending. Mac grimaced. The last thing he wanted was celebrity. But he understood the power of narrative. The cartels had lost more than soldiers and equipment. They'd lost face, their aura of invincibility shattered by one determined American. Sheriff Coulter arrived with the morning patrol report. Mac, we've got volunteers showing up. Veterans, mostly. They want to help secure the ranch. I don't need, with respect, Colonel, you do. This isn't over. Word is, there's already $1 million bounty on your head. Every sicario from here to Mexico City wants a piece of you. Over the next week, Mac's ranch transformed again. What had been a solitary defensive position became an informal training center. Veterans arrived daily, former Marines, Army Rangers, SEALs. They came to help, but also to learn. Mac's successful defense had become a case study in asymmetric warfare. Rebecca watched her father conduct tactical classes in the damaged workshop. You know what you've become? She asked during a break. You're not just defending your ranch anymore. You're teaching others to defend theirs. Mac paused his instruction on improvised defensive positions. Places like this are the last line. When the government can't or won't protect people, they need to protect themselves. Federal agencies established a permanent presence. The DA used Mac's property as a forward operating base. Border Patrol conducted training exercises. The quiet ranch had become a bulwark against cartel expansion. 3 weeks after the battle, Mac received an unexpected visitor. General Patricia Morrison, his former commander in Delta Force, arrived unannounced. Mac, she said, surveying the rebuilding efforts. Impressive work. The Pentagon's been studying your defense. Some want to bring you back as a consultant. I'm retired, Pat. Are you? Looks like you're running a training camp for irregular warfare. She had a point. Mac spent his days teaching defensive tactics, consulting with federal agencies, and coordinating with local law enforcement. His retirement had become more intense than active duty. The conversation was interrupted by Agent Chin. "Colonel, we've got a situation. Intercepts suggest Nueva Guerra is planning operations against facilities in Phoenix. They're adapting your defensive concepts." Mac felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. The cartels were learning from their defeats, applying lessons in asymmetric warfare against other targets. His successful defense had unintended consequences. That evening, sitting on his damaged porch with Rebecca, Mac opened up about his concerns. "I wanted to protect my home. Now I've started something bigger. Dad, you showed people they don't have to be victims. That's important. Maybe. But wars have a way of expanding. Ask me how I know." A month after the second battle, Mac made a decision. Working with federal authorities, he formalized his training program. The ranch became the Reynolds Center for Territorial Defense, offering courses to law enforcement, security professionals, and selected civilians. The transformation wasn't just physical. Mac himself changed. The solitary rancher became a teacher, mentor, and symbol. He appeared before congressional committees, advocating for better border security. He consulted with state governments on rural defense strategies. The man who'd wanted only peace found himself at the center of a new kind of war. 6 months later, intelligence revealed the cartels had placed Mac on their high-value target list. Multiple organizations offered bounties. But something unexpected happened. American veterans began establishing similar defensive positions along the border. Mac's example had inspired a movement. "You've created a problem for them," Agent Chen observed during a strategy session. "They can't intimidate communities that know how to fight back." Mac studied recent intelligence reports. Cartel incursions had decreased significantly in areas where his students established defensive networks. "It's not about fighting," he said. "It's about being too hard a target. Make them go somewhere else." The transformation reached its culmination when Rebecca announced she was moving back to the ranch permanently. "If you're going to run a school for heroes, you need a medic on staff," she said. "This isn't the life I wanted for you." "It's the life I'm choosing, Dad." Mom would understand. As the first-year anniversary of the initial attack approached, Mac's ranch bore little resemblance to the quiet cattle operation it had been. Security systems ringed the property. A new training facility stood where the barn had burned. The main house, rebuilt and reinforced, served as both home and command center. Mac stood in his old observation post, watching the sunset. The landscape looked the same, but everything had changed. He'd started as a man defending his home and had become something else, a teacher of defenders, a symbol of resistance. His phone buzzed with a message from General Morrison. "Heard about your training center." The old magic's still there. Sarah would be proud. Mac smiled, remembering his wife's words about finding new purpose in retirement. He'd found it, though not in the way either of them had imagined. Below, veterans conducted evening security sweeps while federal agents monitored intelligence feeds. His isolated ranch had become a beacon, proof that ordinary Americans could stand against extraordinary threats. The war hadn't ended. It had evolved. And Mac Reynolds, the reluctant warrior who just wanted to raise cattle in peace, had evolved with it. His last stand had become a first step, showing others that with preparation, determination, and the right principles, anyone could defend what mattered. As stars appeared over Texas, Mac felt a sense of completion. He'd spent a career defending America in distant lands. Now he defended it at home, not just with weapons, but with knowledge, teaching others to stand as he had stood. The transformation was complete. The soldier had become a teacher. The defender had become a builder of defenders. And the quiet ranch had become a fortress of American resolve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new students eager to learn. But tonight, Mac Reynolds stood watch over his transformed domain, guardian of more than just land, guardian of an idea that free people, properly prepared, need never bow to terror. The cartels had awakened something they couldn't kill, the indomitable spirit of Americans defending their own. And Mac, the retired colonel who just wanted peace, had become its embodiment. The cartel's defeat was undeniable. Within 18 months of Mac's initial battle, Nueva Guerra ceased operations in Texas entirely. Their leadership imprisoned or eliminated, their networks disrupted, they retreated to safer territories where resistance proved less formidable. Mac's training center graduated its 100th class, sending prepared defenders back to communities across the Southwest. Border incursions dropped 60% in areas where his students established watch programs. The Reynolds method, combining military tactics with community coordination, became standard law enforcement training. The rogue operator, Ghost, resurfaced briefly in cartel operations near Phoenix before disappearing again. Intelligence suggested he'd fled to South America, his reputation as damaged as his former employer's. Mac filed away the information, knowing some accounts remained unsettled. On the second anniversary of the first attack, Mac stood before a gathering of graduates, local officials, and federal agents. His ranch, once a battlefield, now hosted celebration rather than conflict. The American flag flew proudly over buildings that bore scars of combat but stood stronger than before. "You honor me by being here," Mac told the assembly. "But the real honor belongs to each community that refuses to be intimidated, each citizen who chooses preparation over fear." Though some questioned the extent of Mac's actions, most celebrated the powerful message sent: America does not bow to intimidation. Mac, humble yet firm, quietly stepped back from the limelight, continuing his duties without fanfare, steadfast in moral clarity. His story stands as a testament to an enduring American truth, that genuine strength lies not in aggression but in preparedness, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to justice and liberty for all. What do you think about this incredible stand? Do you believe strength alone guarantees justice, or does real power lie in partnership, strategy, and bravery? Share your perspective in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.